I watched through CCTV cameras as my wife humiliated herself in front of her parents, friends, and clients. It was a real show. Bonnie is a very beautiful and smart girl. She opened her own business and I was head over heels in love with her. But she deceived me for 3 years and suffered the most severe punishment for it. And now I'm ready to share my story with you. Enjoy watching it. I'm Paul, a 37-year-old man. Since childhood, I always dreamed of becoming a doctor, but I didn't know which field to choose. Now I am a dentist, and I love my job immensely. I find joy not in causing pain to people, but in helping them. When someone has been suffering from toothache for weeks and they come to me and I can help them, that feeling is priceless. I love my job, and thanks to it, I earn good money to fulfill not only my desires, but also those of my wife. Bonnie, my wife, is 6 years younger than me. We met when I wasn't yet the accomplished dentist I am today. She came to me with toothache, and I helped her. Bonnie was the one who took the initiative and invited me for a walk in the park.
Paul, thank you so much. I am very grateful to you and want to invite you for a walk in the park and treat you to ice cream. What do you think about that?
I agreed. I was 31 at that time, and I had never had a girlfriend in my life. I don't know if that's normal or not, but I spent my entire life studying and then working, never really thinking about relationships. I never understood why some guys needed to engage in intimacy several times a day. That feeling was unfamiliar to me, and I didn't understand them, just as they didn't understand me. I simply didn't have time for girls, and it didn't bother me. However, I couldn't refuse Bonnie. She was a blonde with a toned figure, and she smelled of expensive perfume. I thought I had never seen a more beautiful woman in my life. On our first date, we kissed, and that same evening we went to my place, and we had a long, passionate night.
Paul, you're so hungry, as if you've been abstaining for a year.
Bonnie said when we had finished and were just lying in bed. I didn't expect it myself, but it was like I had unleashed something. I thought she was the most beautiful woman, and I either hadn't noticed or cared about other women before. That evening marked the beginning of our relationship. We engaged in intimacy at every convenient opportunity. At home, in the park, at the cinema, in the wardrobe, in the parking lot, at the zoo, and even a couple of times in my office. In short, it could be called a full-blown passion, and after 8 months, I proposed to her, and she agreed. Bonnie had her online store for women's lingerie. I think men will understand what that means, and I loved it. Together, we contributed to our family budget, had a luxurious wedding on a yacht in the Indian Ocean, got a Chow Chow dog named Max, and a daughter arrived after some time who is now 3 years old. Everything was good. We didn't deny ourselves anything. Bonnie pursued her passion and I pursued mine. However, things began to change when Max, our dog, entered the picture. Max was quite an expensive breed, very smart and well-behaved, but required a lot of attention and care. So Bonnie took Max to the vet twice a month for checkups to ensure everything was okay with our pet. I didn't understand this. In my opinion, you take a pet to the vet if something is wrong, or for routine vaccinations, deworming, and the like. We got Max as a puppy after our daughter was born. When I saw Bonnie planning vet visits 5 times in 3 months, I decided to inquire.
Dear, what's going on? Is there something wrong with Max? Why do you take him to the vet so often?
Paul, he's a puppy. What if he catches something? Dogs like him need regular checkups, especially since Max is special. He needs to be taken more often.
Bonnie replied.
Are you sure it's necessary to go so often? I just don't understand, as a doctor, the purpose of these visits if everything necessary has already been done. It's like a patient coming to me after I've treated and checked them to see if everything is still okay. With such paranoia, an illness might develop.
I said.
Paul, I told you it's the breed. They need regular checkups, and besides, I don't want our pet to get sick in the future. If you don't believe me, read about it on the internet.
She retorted.
All right. I believe you, dear. If it's necessary, then take Max to the vet at least twice a week. The main thing is for everything to be fine,
I said, dropping the subject with Bonnie. This conversation happened exactly 3 years ago, and after that, I closed the topic of vet visits. We continued to live a peaceful family life. Of course, I spent most of my time working, and Bonnie either took care of our little one or went out with her friends, having arranged for her parents to look after our daughter. That's how we lived, and the first 5 years of our marriage went unnoticed. However, everything changed when a student doing an internship at our clinic brought up the topic of pets. He had a Sphinx cat and talked to me about how he took care of it. It was interesting to me because I never understood how someone could keep a bald cat at home. He changed my opinion by saying that the only downside to such cats is that they smell very strongly when they use the toilet, which amused me. He also mentioned that recently his cat got poisoned, and he had to take her to the vet. Curious, I decided to ask him,
It's a pity about your cat, but how often do you usually take her to the vet?
Oh, I do not know. Maybe 2 or 3 times a year. But for what purpose are you interested?
He asked, and I shared that I have a Chow Chow dog, and my wife and I take her to the vet at least 2 or 3 times a month.
Why so often?
The student asked. And at that question I was at a loss because, indeed, why?
My wife says that for the dog's health, it needs regular checkups and some procedures.
Strange, usually if the pet is fine. Once a year is enough. I don't see the point in such frequent visits.
He remarked, and I pondered on that. Thanking him, I got back to work. It was challenging not to think and shut off my thoughts. Various images were swirling in my mind. What if Bonnie had been deceiving me all this time? Struggling through the day, I headed home. Bonnie was at home with our daughter, Jane, and Max. The evening went as usual. We had dinner, watched a movie, put our daughter to bed, and went to our bedroom. A thought occurred to me. Lately, Bonnie and I rarely engage in intimate moments. If it happens, it's quick and almost emotionless, as if she's just fulfilling her marital duty. I remembered that the last time we were intimate was over a month ago, and for some reason, I hadn't noticed such breaks before. So when we lay down tonight, I started approaching Bonnie, but she rejected me, saying,
Paul, I have a headache. I don't want it today. Let's do it another time.
Silently, I backed off, and it saddened me that my own wife turned me down, considering the fact that I don't demand it so often.
Do you have any plans for tomorrow? I'm off, and we could go somewhere together to an amusement park or just for a walk somewhere.
I decided to ask and suggest. I didn't expect a specific answer, just that we hadn't gone out together for a long time, so I hoped Bonnie would accept my proposal.
I'm afraid you're at a bad time. I won't be here until noon tomorrow morning. A new set of underwear has arrived, and I need to take a nice picture of it for sale. After that, I'll pick up Max and we'll go to the vet. At 16 horas, I have a swimming pool. By the time I get home, there won't be any point in going out.
Bonnie explained. Hearing this, I simply said,
Okay, I got it.
A couple of seconds later, Bonnie directly told me,
Listen, Paul, since you'll be home tomorrow, I'll call my parents in the morning and tell them they don't need to come.
I didn't like the tone of the conversation, so I decided to leave our daughter with my parents and proceed with my plan. I wanted to watch my wife tomorrow, if only to check if she really goes to the vet. By 9 a.m., Bonnie was already not at home. I woke up, called my parents, and my mom said she could take care of Jane after lunch. It wasn't part of my plans, but I told her.
Okay, I'll bring Jane after lunch.
Is everything okay with you? You seem nervous, son.
My mom asked.
Everything's fine. I'll let you and Dad know if anything goes wrong,
I replied. And my mom and I chatted for a few more minutes. After the conversation, I went to do some household chores. The hours seemed to stretch into eternity, but at 12:30 p.m., Bonnie returned home. She quickly grabbed Max and left, kissing me on the cheek before leaving. I hurriedly took Jane to my parents and quickly drove to the veterinary clinic, where Bonnie's car was parked. I didn't understand what to do, so after hiding my car, I went to the nearest bench and sat there for 2 hours, thinking to myself, what can you do for 2 hours with a dog at the vet? Many questions were swirling in my head, and I felt like I was in a stupor. But at some point I snapped out of it when Bonnie finally came out of the clinic, apparently getting ready to go home. I didn't want to go home until I knew something, so I came up with a silly idea. As soon as Bonnie left, I went to the clinic. Approaching the door, my legs wobbled, and I abandoned the idea. Looks like I wasted so much time here, I thought to myself. After sitting on the bench for 2 hours, I hadn't learned anything substantial, so I needed to be more decisive. Bonnie was supposed to stop by home and then head to the pool. It was 3:15 p.m. and her pool appointment was at 4 p.m. Realizing that I wouldn't have time to pick up Jane, go home, and then follow Bonnie, I decided to call my friend, Raymond.
Raymond, hi. Sorry to bother you, but I have a very important matter. I won't forget this. Are you in your car?
Hi, yes, I'm delivering orders right now. What happened?
He replied, and I explained the situation, that I needed him to follow my wife, to whom I would say that I was taking Jane to the park.
That sounds interesting. I'm in. Where is Bonnie now?
She should be at home. Head there. I'll send you her car's license plate via SMS.
Okay, we'll stay in touch.
He concluded, and I hung up only to receive a call from Bonnie.
Paul, where are you? I'm back already. Why aren't you and Jane at home? I told you about my 4:09 p.m. pool appointment. What's unclear? I wanted to drop Max at home and go right away, but now I have to feed Max, and I might be late.
She started. How tired I was of her calling me by name. Earlier, she used to come up with affectionate names like Bunny, Kitten, Darling, and so on.
Jane and I are walking in the park. What happened? I filled the bowls with food. How was the visit to the vet? Is Max okay?
I said, and Bonnie answered in a cold voice.
Okay, see you tonight. I'm late.
I used to always accommodate Bonnie and do everything she said, but as soon as I did something differently than she had planned, she would get angry immediately. It was awful. I decided to pick up Jane a little later. Right now, I needed to address unfinished business. Raymond called me and said that Bonnie had just left the house. Meanwhile, I decided to have a coffee at a cafe to pass the time. After 30 minutes, Raymond called me and said,
Dude, you won't believe it. Your wife first went to the veterinary clinic, picked up some guy, and now they've arrived at a hotel nearby. I'll send you the address.
Darn. I'm waiting for the address and heading there. Thanks for the help.
I said.
Are you sure I should leave?
Raymond asked.
Yes, but you can do one more thing. Take pictures of them if they haven't left yet.
I confidently replied. And in a couple of minutes, my phone had a few fresh photos of my wife and the man heading into a hotel. Now I had no doubts. My wife, Bonnie, was cheating on me with the vet. What a horror. I went to pick up Jane and told my father everything, since I didn't know what to do next. My father recommended gathering all the evidence and, most importantly, not showing that I knew something. It was hard for me to deal with this. How could I stay silent? But I decided that they both needed to be punished, so I chose to wait. My father gave me the contact of a good detective who agreed to help, and we started our work. I went home with Jane and began to make a plan, while also calling a good lawyer who explained all the intricacies and what I needed to do. The entire plan was set for a 3-month period. During this time, the detective had to collect all audio, video, and photo materials that could prove my wife's infidelity. Meanwhile, I had to somehow access my wife's phone and download all the information onto my laptop. This was problematic because her phone was password protected. 2 months passed since I learned about my wife's affair with the vet. During this time, I gathered all his details down to the embarrassing incident at school when he was 13. His name was Matthew. He studied at the same college as me, was 5 years younger, and had been divorced twice. His last divorce was 1.5 years ago. His wife left him suspecting infidelity, but she had no real evidence. In general, Matthew had a dull life, and to some extent, I pitied him. But then I sharply remembered that this gentleman met with my wife every day after work, before the gym, during a massage trip, just all the time. On my cloud drive, there were already over 60 photos and 30 videos where Bonnie interacted with Matthew in some way. Excellent work, detective. Bonnie started addressing me differently, using terms like darling and beloved, all because I did everything she said. I played the role of a clueless husband perfectly. During these 2 months, we even managed to engage in intimate moments. Was it repulsive to me? Yes. But I did it intentionally to see her reaction, knowing that today she slept with Matthew, and now she was doing the same with me. No, it didn't bring me pleasure. Let's change the subject. In general, I maintained the role. Everything seemed to be progressing well, but the detective said we had almost made no progress, and I needed to at least hack my wife's phone. At that moment, I didn't know how to do it because she even showered with him. We could install cameras in our home, but the detective had never seen Matthew in our house, and I was even glad about that. Bonnie had enough conscience not to bring him home. But what conscience could we talk about? Then a brilliant idea struck us: to install a listening device in the car. Late at night, I went to the garage and hid the listening device under the car seat. But it didn't yield much, and among all the evidence, we only had photos and videos where my wife walked, kissed, and hugged a man. Maybe that would be enough, but I didn't understand how to catch them red-handed. Everything changed in my favor. A guy booked an appointment with me. I usually don't pay much attention to patients, but I saw Matthew's data and realized he would be my last client tomorrow, seeking treatment for toothache. Dark thoughts crept into my mind. In 2 months, I would have the opportunity to look into the eyes of the man who had been seducing my wife for at least 1.5 years. That night, I couldn't sleep. There were many thoughts, from horrifying ones to those urging me to just let him go. But no, that couldn't be done. Harming my patients was out of the question. With that thought, I went to work in the morning. Matthew's appointment was at 3:01 p.m. I greeted him, and he seemed quite intelligent and kind. Of course, he loved animals, but I wondered how one could love animals and sleep with someone else's wife. Such things seemed incompatible to me. He sat in the chair and complained about his problem. I conducted a preliminary examination and found the following: 5 teeth were affected by cavities, causing him toothache. Also, there were issues with his bite, which could lead to displacement of teeth and severe discomfort in the future. I told Matthew about his problems and how to solve them. He agreed to the procedures and was supposed to visit 5 times. When Matthew came to me for the first appointment, I did everything correctly, fixed 1 tooth, and sent him home. Matthew and I became friends. He seemed like a great guy to me, but to be honest, a couple of times, I felt like extracting the wrong tooth from him. Still, I restrained myself as best as I could. After all, personal matters are personal, and work is work. Besides, I had this intrusive thought of going through Matthew's phone to check his contacts. But I couldn't do that since my patient was unconscious, and I couldn't just take his phone. It was at least unprofessional, and sacrificing my beloved job because of my cheating wife was not something I wanted. I also talked to Matthew and realized that he didn't know who I was, although initially I thought he knew me and just pretended not to. Because I knew half of his life, it was easy for me to communicate with him. He told me about his job, studies, and his wife, who left him when she found out he was cheating on her. I decided to learn more about this, and he told me the story. He worked at a veterinary clinic, and once an attractive girl came to him with a puppy. She came once, twice, thrice, and on the 4th time, they started dating. She took the initiative and gave him gifts. He shared that he wanted to end the relationship after the 1st month, but she manipulated him. And now, for 3 years, he felt trapped, controlled in every step, unable to break free. So he didn't tell her that he was fixing teeth, for at least somewhere to feel some freedom. He said everything would have been fine if not for one but. She was married. It bothered him a lot, but there was nothing he could do. She came to his workplace anytime and could distract him for about 10 minutes and go to the bathroom with him for intimacy. Bonnie intimidated Matthew, saying her husband, me, was a military man who went through a war. If he dared to leave her, she would tell her husband, and then Matthew would be in trouble. I understood that he was a frightened guy who fell under the influence of a bad girl who manipulated him in every possible way. How terrible it was. He told me all this, and I projected the whole situation onto myself and realized that the same thing happened to me. Bonnie manipulated me like a puppet to dance to her tune. I took out my phone and showed Matthew a photo of Bonnie. Matthew's pupils dilated and he barely managed to say,
You, her husband?
Yes, I'm her husband, and honestly, initially I wanted to punish you. But now I understand that we're in the same boat, and we need to come up with a plan to get revenge on her. Don't worry. I've taken care of everything for you perfectly.
I told him. This he shared with me on our last appointments. I don't know why, but I trusted him. I didn't think he was lying. At least if he really knew me, he wouldn't have come to me for treatment and told me all this, knowing that I could do anything with his teeth. So 3 months passed since I learned about my wife's affair. The situation took an unexpected turn, and I started working together with her lover. Who would have thought I still find it funny? But in general, events started developing faster. Bonnie had no idea that Matthew and I knew each other. We communicated through messages. He told me that they would meet in a hotel on Saturday, and Bonnie told me that she would have to leave for work in another city. It was an excellent opportunity to take revenge. Matthew had already booked a room in the hotel, and on Saturday morning, I went there. Jane stayed with my parents, and Bonnie supposedly was going to work. I was already in the room and prepared everything, waiting for a signal from Matthew. At 12:30 p.m., the door key turned and Bonnie and Matthew entered the room. Bonnie began,
Baby, you can't imagine how much I love the feeling of a clean room and what will happen here soon. But you know what I dislike the most.
What, sweetheart?
Matthew said.
When I'm not told everything, you don't want to tell me anything?
She asked.
What are you talking about, darling? What haven't I told you?
Why do I learn that you fixed your teeth from strangers, not from you? Was it difficult for you to tell me about it?
After these words, I felt sweat running down my face. If she suspected that Matthew and I were working together, our entire plan would fail.
No, dear. I wanted to tell you about it after completing all the procedures. I have one more appointment left. I found a good specialist and wanted to recommend him to you. You recently complained about toothache too. The doctor's name is Paul, I think.
Bonnie approached Matthew and covered his mouth with her hand.
I'm not interested in who treated you. It's a lousy clinic and specialists. You could have consulted with me first, and I would have helped you choose. Now, for not listening to me, today, you will be my slave, and I will be your mistress. Understood?
She said and put Matthew on his knees. It was not part of our plan,
Yes, mistress, I understand.
he replied. Meanwhile, I sat in the adjacent room, watched everything through the cameras, and was in complete shock from what I saw. Anger and resentment boiled inside me. But finally, Bonnie went to the fridge and took out a bottle of wine. Matthew quickly approached and said he would pour. Bonnie, in the meantime, went to the shower. Matthew added an interesting tablet to the wine. He intentionally fed Bonnie before arriving at the hotel, so her stomach was clearly full. When Bonnie finished showering, Matthew had a glass of wine with her and said he would also take a shower. While Matthew was in the shower, Bonnie had another glass of wine and at that moment was doing something on her phone. I received a message on my phone from Bonnie. "Sweetheart, I miss you. It turns out it's my model's birthday, and I had some wine. I'll take a taxi home and get the car later, so don't be mad, darling." I felt disgusted, didn't respond, and just watched. Matthew pretended to be in the shower for 30 minutes, longer than Bonnie. Meanwhile, Bonnie, dressed in one of her underwear sets, took out all her accessories and got ready for the upcoming event. The pill began to take effect. It was evident from Bonnie's movements. She began to walk around the room and, unable to stand it, knocked on the bathroom door with the words,
Matthew, come out. I need to go to the toilet.
Yes, just a moment.
Matthew replied. 10 more minutes passed and Bonnie started screaming and banging on the door, clearly unable to wait any longer. At that very moment, someone knocked on the door of her room. She put on a robe, approached the door to see who it was, and upon opening it, she found her parents. I had called them before and told them where to come for Bonnie to prepare a surprise. Bonnie was bewildered and didn't understand what was happening. It was evident that she could barely hold herself together. At that moment, Matthew shouted from the shower,
Mistress, your servant will be out soon.
Hearing this, her parents realized it wasn't my voice and entered the room. At the same time, 2 of Bonnie's friends, to whom I had also said that Bonnie had a surprise for them, entered the room. There were supposed to be 3 of them, but one couldn't make it. A few minutes later, more people entered the room. They were regular clients of my wife, to whom I had written, saying there would be a lingerie show in this room today. Thus, in one space with Bonnie, there were 10 people whom she never expected to see. I honestly hoped for more, but this number was enough to create a spectacle. We paid the hotel administration, so they were aware of what would happen today, and they allowed all interested parties to enter. Bonnie started rushing around the room, and the crucial moment arrived. She poured like a river. She began to move around the room, emitting a fountain of brown liquid. Everything splattered on her parents, friends, and clients who did not expect such a turn of events. Matthew sat in the bathroom watching the cameras and sent me messages that it was simply fantastic, and the manipulator was getting what she deserved. Bonnie couldn't stop, and I fear to imagine the smell in the room at that moment. Someone started recording it on their phone. Her parents ran out of the room in horror. It reached the point where Bonnie grabbed all the bed covers, ran outside, got into her car, and drove somewhere. She went home. All the guests left the room, and Matthew was already suffocating in the bathroom, so I went to save him. The room was ruined, the stench was worse than in a public restroom, and everything was brown. We left the room, paid an additional $2,000 to the hotel administrator for causing such damage. Arriving home, I saw her car, and I breathed a sigh of relief because I was worried she might get into trouble in an intoxicated state. Everything went not according to plan for us. Entering the living room, I saw Bonnie sitting on the floor crying. Next to her were the divorce papers that I left for her. At that moment, I received a message from Raymond, who sent me a video that his friends had sent him. "Dude, you're a genius. How did you come up with this?" One of Bonnie's friends recorded this video and started sending it to all her acquaintances. What great friends she had. I sat down next to Bonnie and explained the situation. I let her know that she got off lightly and that it could have been worse. At the very least, I could have called the police and reported that she was driving under the influence.
You lied to me for 3 years, do you understand? You blatantly cheated on me. I'll give you a chance to start a new life, but I have a few conditions. You will divorce me. I no longer want you to be my wife. You will leave the state or go to your parents, but I don't think staying here is a reasonable solution. You have enough money. You'll go to another state and start a new life. Jane will stay with me, and you can visit her. Those are my conditions,
I said. Bonnie looked at me and silently agreed. I could see that she was repentant. I was actually glad that she felt remorse and wasn't angry with me. 6 months have passed since those events. I live with Jane, and Bonnie visits us with Max on weekends. I don't feel anything for her. My parents and Bonnie's parents actively support me so I can work peacefully and spend my free time with my daughter. Bonnie lost her business but started building a new one in a new place, and it's successful. She severed all her past connections and no longer communicates with any of her old acquaintances. Matthew found a girlfriend with whom he feels happy, and I'm happy for him. We stay in touch and even meet occasionally. I hold no grudges against anyone. My main concern is for my daughter to grow up healthy and not lack anything. Such a situation happened in my life. Thank you for listening to it.
That's the end of the story. Share your opinion in the comments. Why do you think the main character did not notice his wife's infidelity, which lasted 3 years? Why was he so blind? Is it true that the wife of the main character will improve and start life from scratch? Share your opinion in the comments, and we believe that the main character noticed everything, and maybe even guessed, but tried to drive away these thoughts. It seems to us that the ex-wife of the main character has really changed, and will not repeat such mistakes again. She did not resist the divorce and even allowed her daughter to be left to her father. All this suggests that she is remorseful and very sorry for what she did. Subscribe to the channel and like it. Good luck.